Lin Tian stepped forward, his sharp eyes scanning the scene before him. The air was thick with tension, and the ground beneath his feet seemed to tremble with anticipation. In front of him stood Lin Tian, a figure of quiet authority, but what caught Lin Tian's attention was the brutal scene unfolding before them. Dozens of towering minotaur demons, their bodies infused with dark, demonic energy, loomed like ancient titans. Their glowing, menacing eyes pierced through the dim light, sending an involuntary shiver down Lin Tian's spine. Big Bull Li, a hulking figure with a physique that rivaled the minotaurs themselves, frowned in confusion. His massive arms crossed over his chest as he turned to Brutal, the enigmatic figure who had brought them here. "Brutal," he rumbled, his voice deep and gravelly. "Is this the so-called friend you mentioned? This low-level goblin? Are you out of your mind, or are my eyes failing me?" He had expected a formidable ally, perhaps a Tier 7 Overlord Goblin or, at the very least, a Tier 6-1. But what stood before him was hardly more impressive than a pile of dog dung. The goblin in question, Lin Tian, seemed unremarkable at first glance, his small stature and unassuming demeanor a stark contrast to the towering minotaurs. Brutal, however, remained unfazed. His expression was calm, almost serene, as if he had anticipated this reaction. "Mr. Bull," he said, his voice steady, "don't worry. His strength is on par with mine." Big Bully raised an eyebrow, but chose not to question further. His mind was preoccupied with one thing, the prospect of feasting on human flesh. The thought of tearing into the tender, succulent meat of the humans in Bright Town was enough to make his mouth water. He licked his lips, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. As the group moved forward, Lin Tian followed at a distance, his sharp mind analyzing the situation. "Good heavens," he muttered under his breath. "A whole herd of minotaurs?" Though he had engaged in his fair share of minotaur-like behavior in the past, he harbored no fondness for the creatures. The minotaur law was simple: better to deceive than be deceived. And this group was undeniably formidable. They soon reached a small hill outside Bright Town, keeping to the shadows while observing the patrolling soldiers. Brutal pointed forward, his voice tinged with deep-seated hatred. "That's the place," he said, his eyes narrowing. "But beware, there's a notorious sword-wielding woman inside, ferocious and incredibly strong." Big Bully scoffed, his massive chest heaving with laughter. "Humph! I like my meals to put up a fight." Without hesitation, he shoved Brutal aside and marched toward Bright Town, the rest of the Minotaur demons following closely behind. They made no effort to conceal their approach, their heavy footsteps causing the ground to tremble. In the distance, several patrolling soldiers felt the vibrations beneath their feet. "What's that?" one asked, his voice tinged with confusion. "An earthquake?" Another soldier pointed frantically, his eyes wide with terror. "Look! Over the hill!" A collective shudder ran through the group as realization struck. Minotaur demons. So many of them. Terror gripped their hearts. These infamous man-eaters had plagued countless villages in the past. Though the church had long driven them into the great tomb, forcing them into hiding, none had expected to encounter such a horde here. Panic took hold. The soldiers turned on their heels and ran, their shouts of alarm echoing through the night. Lin Tian watched from the shadows, his expression unreadable. "Are they really that terrifying?" he mused. "Personally, I think goblins are far scarier than any Minotaur demon." While goblins were currently weak, the intelligent, high-tier ones held immense potential. If Bright Town fell, Lin Tian had plans to cultivate goblins into a powerful force, establishing a city where sheer numbers would lead to strength. The thought brought a faint smile to Lin Tian's lips, but it quickly faded as the Minotaur demons stormed down from the hill, their massive forms landing with earth-shaking force. Buildings crumbled beneath their weight, the sound of splintering wood and collapsing stone filling the air. Big Bull Lee leaped into a tavern, his massive bulk instantly flattening a group of drinking soldiers. The remaining patrons sobered in an instant, scrambling for their weapons. But before they could react, Big Bull Lee grabbed one, stuffing him into his mouth, armor and all, chewing effortlessly. "Good teeth are truly a blessing," he muttered, his voice muffled by the crunch of bone and metal. The other Minotaur demons followed suit, their intent not mass slaughter, but indulgence in a grotesque feast. They seized whoever they could, sitting down casually to eat, unconcerned by the feeble attacks of the surviving soldiers. Brutal, however, had another target. He entered Bright Town with purpose, his eyes scanning the chaos for the Sword Saintess and her allies. Then, the familiar rumble of underground movement sent a warning through the air. Brutal's instinct screamed at him. He quickly stepped aside, just as Marshall erupted from below, spear in hand. Austin emerged from a nearby house, his expression grim, while Emma positioned herself, her bow at the ready. A silver arc sliced through the chaos. Swish! A single strike of sword chi cleaved a Minotaur demon in half, saving the tavern owner. The man scrambled away in terror before turning back to shout with relief. "Sword Saintess!" Alishnia stepped out, clad in full armor, her presence commanding. Thelamon's voice rang out, clear and authoritative. "All soldiers, regroup around me. Do not panic. A panicked retreat would mean a slaughter." As the battle raged on, Austin's expression turned serious for the first time. "Why are there so many Minotaurs?" he muttered, feeling a heavy pressure settle over him. Marshall, gripping his spear tightly, glared at Brutal. "That guy's from the Great Tomb. He must have summoned them. We should have killed him when we had the chance." Alasnia clenched her sword, her eyes filled with determination. "That was my mistake. I'll fix it." Without hesitation, she charged at one of the Minotaurs. She knew she had messed up before. Instead of chasing Lin Tian, she should have dealt with Brutal. Now, because of her mistake, Bright Town was under attack. The Minotaur tried to grab her, but before it could, her blade flashed. In an instant, its massive hand turned into nothing but a mist of blood. With one swift motion, she beheaded it. Seeing this, Austin and the others launched their own attacks. Thelamon quickly gave orders. "The Minotaurs are too strong. Use spears to hold them back." Brutal clashed with Marshall. There were only about 30 of them. If nothing unexpected happened, they could win with minimal casualties. Alishnia alone had already taken down 4 or 5. Meanwhile, Big Bull Lee had devoured 7 or 8 people. But his attention soon shifted. He noticed the Sword Saintess, Alishnia, her strong figure, her fair skin. She must taste the best. Lin Tian had the same thought, though not about eating her. Big Bull Lee smashed through several houses, charging straight at Alishnia. His enormous body and terrifying strength made him unstoppable. With a sudden lunge, he threw a massive punch at her back. His fist was bigger than a person. But even while fighting a Minotaur, Alasnia had one hand free. She caught his punch with a single hand. They were evenly matched. Big Bull Lee was shocked. "Impossible!" His greatest pride was his unmatched strength, yet a human had stopped him. "Brute force!" he roared, activating his skill to increase his power. The impact forced Alishnia to step back, but she was unharmed. Their intense battle continued. Meanwhile, Brutal was still locked in combat with Marshall, though his strength hadn't fully returned. Despite this, he put up a fierce fight, utilizing his earth-walking technique to vanish underground. "Damn beast!" he growled, his voice echoing from beneath the surface. "Let's see how you handle this." Lin Tian, observing from a distance, felt a surge of excitement. "Earth-walking? This is exactly what I've been waiting for." Seizing the opportunity, He quietly channeled his stone magic, launching a covert attack from afar to tip the scales in their favor. Marshall's whole body went numb. A big explosion happened, and a single strike from Lin Tian was enough to deal with Marshall. The battle was far from over, but the tide was turning. The defenders of Bright Town fought with everything they had, their determination unwavering. The Minotaurs, though formidable, were slowly being pushed back.